So, in your own words, who was Louis Rossman?
Yeah, I guess repair person. Yes.
Repair person? Easy. So, tell us about your early days and how you got into this business.
So I wanted to be a recording engineer. I realized I was horrible at it. I was interning at a recording studio. At that recording studio, there were two distinct cultures. There was the Williamsburg douchebag hipster culture, and that was mostly the assistant engineers and the production assistants, and I didn't really fit in with them very well, and they made it very obvious from the beginning that I did not fit in with them. And then there was, like, the technician culture. It was kind of like the old school New York plumber tradesman kind of culture. They were all, in their late 40s, early 50s, and I seemingly got along with them a lot better. And one of them, I'm never going to forget this. When they were being nice to me, I was asked, like, you guys are really also welcoming. Why? And he's like, well, we noticed that you're the only one of the interns that actually cleans the toilets. I thought that was very interesting. So they, every time I had questions about what wasn't working in any of the studio rooms, they would take 45 minutes out of their day to explain, here's how a transistor works, here's how this works, here's how that works. And I found it fun to work in the tech room. So I started working in the tech room, and instead of going on the recording engineer track, I started going on the, fixing tape machines, fixing, Studer 800s, Neve 8088s, 31102s, LA2As and stuff like that. And I found that fun. Now, that studio was kind of a place where they called the people that were in their late 20s kids. So I realized, like, I'm 17 years old. I could work here for 10 years and still be considered a kid. So I went back to this other smaller but not so great studio that I was interning at, and I was worked there. And when the end of 2008 happened, he decided to close. So I thought, okay, so I have a session I want to finish. I have no money. I have no place to work. So I need to get a device that works with Logic, and so I bought a broken MacBook on eBay. I didn't know it was broken; it just arrived broken, and the guy gave me a small discount on it. And after he gave me a small discount on it, I got, I managed to resell it for a profit of $200 or $300 when I realized they no longer needed it, because that guy wound up getting a different place to work out of. So I have no money. I make no money. And I just made $200 for about 10 minutes of my time. So let me do this again. So eventually, there was this one person that called me. I'm never going to forget. And he said, "Why don't you offer this as a service rather than just buy and resell?" And I said, "There's no way I could do that. What do you mean? All these people are doing the service at $199. I can't compete with that." And then he said, "No, watch this. When you call them, they're going to say it's $199, but when you show up in person, they're going to say that's for the part. When you show up, they're going to say it's $350." I'm like, no way. So I did that, and I recorded their phone call, and then I recorded what they said in person, and then I put it on my website, and I said, all these other places are going to tell you it's this price, but it's not. Here's proof. Here's what's going to happen to you. So I started creating my repair business just based on recording the lies that other businesses were telling that were blatantly obvious at the time, and just saying, here, I'm not going to do that. Like, you don't have to pay until it's done. We'll do it in front of you, stock all my parts. And I had people visiting me in Herald Square Park in New York City, and I had, like, my little extension cord that I was trying to run around the table so they wouldn't see that I illegally plugged it into the park and was using their electricity. And it just kind of snowballed from there. So it was a complete accident. Like, one of the things I've said is it's very easy to do 12 or 16 hours a day of work. It's very hard to figure out what direction to do that work. And for me, this was all a complete accident.
Yeah, it sounds like it was extremely organic, which, that's a great thing. And I think, obviously, you had the knack for it, so it worked out, definitely. But I do have a question for you. So for those people out there who don't know, what would you describe right to repair as, and what does it mean?
For me, right to repair means that you have the ability to prepare your own products. It means that the manufacturers are not putting artificial roadblocks in your way of being able to do that. Right to repair is not, because there was a propagandistic interview that came out with Marques Brownlee recently, who just didn't ask any critical questions on any of this stuff, where Apple was responding saying, we want to make devices that have better longevity, and we also want to make devices that are like portable and people that want to use. And there's this misconception that right to repair means that I want to have a cell phone that's the size of what Gordon Gekko was using in the movie Wall Street. And that's not really what it's about. Right to repair is about manufacturers not putting intentional barriers between you and your ability to do your job. So, for instance, the manufacturer not telling a parts company that would completely be able to sell you a part, don't sell to any of these guys. That would be something that right to repair would advocate for. Or, for instance, a PDF manual being available that says, here's what the name of this chip and here's how this is interconnected are. Like we used to get in the old days when you bought something and it showed up with the manuals. Not making something like that available. That's the type of thing that right to repair would advocate to change. So right to repair is you should have the ability to repair your own product, and the manufacturer should not be putting intentional roadblocks in your way of doing so.
It's an interesting concept that we've kind of gone down this road very gradually of just losing the power over the stuff that we buy. Like we don't actually, it becomes increasingly hard to repair something, but also sometimes, when it comes to software updates, we have no control over what gets updated, and things get broken or changed around. There's nothing we can do about it. And it seems like we're just kind of tumbling down this road. But I do want to ask you something specifically on Apple, but I know other companies have started to do it, but this whole concept of parts pairing, for people who don't know what that is, could you describe that, and what kind of issues can something like that cause?
Well, there's two distinct issues here, and I've had people that are like more on the engineering side kind of like really dig into this, and the reason that I haven't dug into the difference between these two distinct terms is because for the end user it winds up having the same result. So the first is parts pairing, where a part will have a serial number, and the device will check the serial number of that part, and if it has changed, it'll say even if that is a perfectly compatible part, even if you have taken that part out of another device that you just purchased new for $2,000, something about that won't work properly, and that's something that's obviously bad for many people. It's one thing when the manufacturer will not make parts available to you. It's another when you're like, fine, F it. I will go to a dumpster and try to find a broken device that somebody threw away, and that doesn't even work. That's very annoying and very wasteful. The second is calibration. So there are certain parts where the tolerances are such that they have to be calibrated, and if the part is not, it's not parts pairing per se, it's that this part is not calibrated. So when it is not calibrated and you put a new one in, because of the tight tolerances, it may not work as well. To me, these are a distinction without a difference, because if the manufacturer does not make the calibration tool available to the user or a third-party repair shop, it doesn't really matter to you if it's parts pairing or calibration. The end user simply sees, I've installed a new part, this doesn't work, and the manufacturer is not helping me. So the reason that I haven't really created a distinction much in my videos between calibration and parts pairing is 99% of the time that we're mentioning calibration, nobody's making the tools available to do it to you anyway. And they're not, there's not a manual saying here's how you do it. There's not information out there on how to do it. And even if there was, you usually wouldn't get access to it anyway.
To touch on the concept of this whole calibration thing, why would a company do that? Is it literally because of tolerances and that's just how it is? Or is this one of those things where it's kind of physically stopping a consumer from being able to easily repair their product?
I think that calibration has its points. I mean, I'm not going to give a good example here. I like to say I don't know when I don't know something. But I do remember back in the day with the iPhone 4. I remember if somebody laid up 10 iPhone 4s in front of me, it was very obvious that they used 3 different screen manufacturers. You could usually see the difference in some of these things. So I could imagine why a manufacturer would want to use calibration tools to try and kind of like bring these things together. So after I would install a customer screen, I would go through the menu, try to calibrate it so it looked exactly the way the original did. But you have parts that are going to look different, they're going to feel different, and as things get newer, I imagine this gets more and more difficult. You should have the calibration tool available to you. I don't even think it's something that you should be downloading off the manufacturer's website. If you purchase the device and there's a part that needs to be replaced on a regular basis, you used to get discs with things. Like even this piece of crap printer that I have here, like it comes with a tiny, I'm never going to use it because it's a CD-ROM, but it comes with a CD-ROM. So if I do not have access to the internet, I could set up my printer in case I don't have drivers for it. This used to be a normal thing. So I don't think calibration in and of itself is a bad thing. I have no problem with it. It's just make the tool available to the user. Even parts pairing. I have no problem with parts pairing if you make the tool to do that available to the person who purchased the product. Because if they don't make it available to you, do you actually own it?
Could you give some examples of parts pairings, like say in the iPhone, or if anything's going on in MacBooks? I think that would just be good to clarify for some people.
Sure, for an iPhone, like a battery or a screen, people, what they'll say is, well, I want the right to know. I have the right to know if this device had a battery swapped in it. I want to know that. The interesting thing here is that Apple, they say they care about making repairs more safe, and that it is really unsafe to repair a battery in a phone. Like, it could explode or anything like that. The thing that's weird here is that you've created an incentive structure for a technician to now perform a soldering repair on a battery because he has to take the chip off of the old one. Because you see people doing this in the early days. They were taking the chip off of the old one and putting it onto the new one so that the phone would think it's the same battery. This is one of those things where you actually wind up making the repair more unsafe by virtue of doing this, because they don't want to deal with their customers saying, why is this saying my battery is... That guy could have literally bought an iPhone from a store, never turned it on, taken the battery out, put it in his customer's phone, and now the phone's complaining about it. So he doesn't want to deal with this. He's like, screw this. So he takes the chip off of the old battery and puts it on the new one. And now you've essentially you've taken a repair that used to be safe, and you've ironically that the company that's advocating against right to repair is now making that repair less safe with their own action.
Yeah, that's crazy. Interesting way of thinking about it. So if you take a macro view of this whole right to repair situation, would you say that there's a component where our devices are just becoming so much more intricate that it just becomes harder to physically replace these parts? Or do you think it's 100% manufacturers just making things harder for it?
It's two things at the same time, and I think one I'm allowed to complain about and one I'm not. So for instance, in those MacBooks that I mentioned, the old ones, you would have something called an inverter board. It was approximately like, it was about this, the size of a phone case. So it would be this large, and it would come up to here, and this is what was responsible for your backlights. It was like this high, this large, and that was what created your backlight. And then as time went on, you had a chip that was about this small right over here, like this, barely is the size of here, and that chip was a QFN package with, like probably 5 or 8 solder joints on each side. And then in 2011, they started using this micro BGA chip, which was like this tiny, had 25 balls in the bottom. And you would have technicians say, well, I can't do this repair anymore because now I have to solder. And then the ones who knew how to solder would say, well, I can't do this anymore because I don't know how to do BGA. That I'm not allowed to complain about. That's part of the game. That's part of the challenge. That's part of the craft. Learning how to deal with things when they get smaller and more difficult, that's the game. And we don't get to complain about the game. The part, that's 50%. Things getting smaller, all that type of stuff. It does make it more difficult, but we'll do that. We'll get better. And the people that are not able to get better will, do something else. The second part is the parts not being available. I'll replace a chip that's the size of a human hair if it gets down to that at some point. I'll get the equipment to do that. It's when that chip is when it's a chip that we cannot purchase. It's when we go to to Rochester Electronics and say, I'd like to buy 100,000 of this chip. Tell me what the price is. I'll wire you the money. I expect no customer service. I will never complain. And hopefully you, on the honor system, you'll send me the chips after I send you the money. They'll say we're not allowed to sell this to you. We'd like to, but we're not allowed to. It's restricted. That's the part where the restrictions are things that I push back against, because it's not the manufacturer's job to coddle me into being able to do my job. If they make they're making devices smaller and more complicated so that the end user can have a better device. A device where the backlight driver is this small instead of this large, it's not only better for the user because they get a slimmer device, it's also more energy efficient, and it doesn't die as often. LED drivers almost never die. Inverter boards died all the time because they were just older technology. It wasn't as good. It wasn't as reliable. I want end users to have devices that are slim. I want them to have devices that are energy efficient. I want them to have devices that advance. And that means that we have to keep up with the technology. But keeping up with the technology really it's not the problem. And a lot of manufacturers have just been trying to muddle the waters there and claim, well, we've learned how to make things more reliable, and we've learned how to make, don't you like your phone being thin? That's why you can't have stuff that's repairable. It's complete and utter bullshit.
There's two options, but just in that last sentence, I think it was the LG G5 in 2016 that was still pretty sleek and slim, but you could completely remove the battery. And yeah, like stuff like that, people say like, oh, you lose water resistance and whatnot, but that's not necessarily true. And the second thing is, I just wanted to ask, with how you're talking about how some of the parts from these manufacturers become unavailable or restricted, and they're not allowed to sell that to you. Why do you think that's happening?
There's a number of different reasons it could be the case. If I were to be as generous to the manufacturers as possible, which also admittedly is, kind of depressing on the world stage as possible. If I were to be as generous to them as possible, I would imagine that we simply do not have the capacity to make enough for you and enough for us. That the way that the way that we've got the S&P like from 200 to 550 or whatever the hell it is now is by finding new ways to save as much money as humanly possible. There was this one person, he was a vice president of sales at Intercell a long time ago, and he was telling me what most likely happens when you're getting parts, you're getting screens, the manufacturer will wind up being told, like, we need 15,000 of this today, and then at the end of the day they'll say, never mind, we need 14,000, and they're producing a certain amount a day, and the 1,000 that don't get used wind up getting sold to a broker that then winds up selling it to me. Now, if you told them, make me 15,000, but you only needed 14,000, it's not, even though they're not buying it, there's some sort of waste there with the manufacturer. The manufacturer may charge you more money at this particular point in time as a result of you asking them to do one thing and then you needed another. Like, it's very small. It's a really small inefficiency. But those types of really small inefficiencies are the things that allow spare parts to be available to somebody like me. And if you solve those inefficiencies, you can then, beat down your parts vendor to get a better price and then make the process more efficient. But it also means that I don't get access to spare parts. There was this PICO system that Jim Cam talks about in Star with No. It's like, so like a parts and inventory cost optimization system or something like that. And he was talking about how General Motors would beat their suppliers into submission to try to get the lowest price possible. And I am something like that. If I were to be as generous to the manufacturer as possible, I would say that as they've increased efficiency in their supply chain, they've gotten rid of every single way that somebody like me would be able to get the scrubs or the scraps that are falling out the side of the garbage pail, so to speak. The other flip side of it is just not caring. I mean, who cares if this stuff is available? Who cares if it's a problem? The way that we got all these parts in the old days, I don't imagine that this was, this is not Apple or Samsung or somebody else saying, please, here, we'd like to make this all available and support.apple.com. There really always was this kind of Nicolas Cage, Lord of War element to the supply chain and finding any of this stuff. Even 10 or 15 years ago, when I say there's less parts available now than there were 10 or 15 years ago, it's not because support.apple.com doesn't have them. It's simply because when I email all of the brokers, LG brokers, when I email, people who deal with Texas Instruments chips a lot and Ingersoll chips a lot, they'll just say, we have nothing. And I'll go, why? And like, there's nothing available. And then when I reach out to more sophisticated resellers, whether it's Rochester Electronics or others, they'll say, sorry, we're not allowed to sell this to you. And then that was the aha moment for me, because for most people that do this type of work, it probably sounds weird. We really have no idea where things are coming from. If you're a repair person that started doing this in college in his dorm room, you're not really well versed in the supply chain logistics of LG or Intersil or Texas Instruments. It's just not your thing. You see you need this chip, like you Google the name of the chip. Somebody's selling it. Okay, let me buy from these 5 different people, figure out which one actually sends me something that works, test it on my own thing before I use it on a customer, and then move on. They don't really know the supply chain logistics of any of this stuff. So I imagine that a large part of it is manufacturers restricting access. And if I were to be generous to them, which I'll try to do here, I would imagine it has to do with economies of scale, efficiency, and the more by getting rid of the overflow, they make things cheaper for themselves and their own manufacturers, which again, S&P to 200 to 500 thing. But that also means that I get less over, I have nothing to grab now myself. I guess I think of it like a restaurant, like a Chinese restaurant in New York City where you kind of see all the cats going out to the dumpster. Like there was one right across the street from where I lived. And, if everybody were to finish all of their food and clean their plate, then there'd be nothing for the cat to eat in the dumpster. Like there would be nothing there. I guess that's the simplest analogy that I probably should have started with.
Yeah, never really thought about the whole supply chain and how things work in that sense. Like you just go to a repair shop and they get the screens, but it's kind of like, it's just there. Like they must know what's happening. But interesting perspective you got there. You're quite an advocate for the right to repair movement. What made you really lean in hard to that? And can you say like if your advocacy has had like a successful impact or significant impact?
Let's see. I think I just got into this just because I don't like listening to authority. I mean, in 3rd grade, I remember there was this, we'd have lunch and it would be usually like 40 minutes and there'd be 20 minutes that we'd be in the lunchroom and then 20 minutes where we could go into the schoolyard. And I remember if kids were talking during the announcements at all, they would say you're not allowed, you're not only are you not going to get to go to the schoolyard, but you have to be quiet. None of you can talk. And if you talk, you have to leave. And I just remember saying that this is ridiculous. I mean, none of the announcements that you're giving have any relevance to us whatsoever. We only have 30 minutes out of a 7-hour day. We only have 30 or 40 minutes out of a 7-hour day. We get to actually talk to people and be social and be normal and not be like prisoners, and we don't have to raise our hand to go to the bathroom. And you're going to take that away from us because we were talking during bullshit announcements? We're not going to put up with that. So what I did, I was suggesting to the other kids that we simply walk outside anyway, because that door is not locked. It's a push door. It's incapable of being locked. And they said, well, that's impossible. And I said, well, the 7 aids, I calculated the weight of all the aids, and then I calculated the weight based on the average weight of the kid of all of us. And I said, we wouldn't even have to push. We would simply be able to walk past, because there's 4,000 pounds of kids and, about 500 pounds of the aids for the school. And I remember saying, well, they said, what if we all get in trouble? We can't do that. Well, and I said, you can't do that, because if the entire school district, where if every single kid gets in trouble, that means that they have to tell the superintendent that every single kid in this school misbehaved. How is that going to reflect on them? So I tried to get all the kids to essentially the next time they got punished to just say, F this, and walk out. I mean, this just been my personality since 3rd grade. I don't like what I see to be abusive authority. I've never liked that. And every single day my customers would be showing up, sometimes in tears, saying, they told me it was going to be $1,800. I can't afford that. And I would work on their device and I would see, it's a board that costs $5. Like, it's an inverter board. How the hell were they telling you $1,200 or $1,800? They would say it's the screen and the motherboard, and it was just one part, and that just kind of bothered me. So every single day, it was kind of like being a therapist that deals with people who have been in abusive, traumatic relationships with physical abuse every single day, and you know who the abuser is, and you can't say anything, and it started to bother me. It wasn't even necessarily about me disliking the company. It was just I dislike this company that is treating all these people that are coming to me every day so badly. Every time I would see that they would quote $1,000 or $2,000 when a $5 part and 20 minutes would have fixed the problem. It took me 5 years to even ask the question of, why is it so hard to get parts after all? It was a really weird moment where my mind just kind of woke up and asked, wait, why is it that I have to go through these 40 different vendors that are dumpster diving for things? Why can't I just do it at people in every other industry do? If somebody works in HVAC and they need a contactor for a relay for an air conditioner that's not turning on, they just go to a website or a vendor and they buy it. They just look for the part that they need and they buy it. And that's how electronics used to be. So I kind of started trying to figure out, okay, when did this start? And then when I realized, over the past 10 or 15 years, almost every electronics manufacturer just slowly started going back on the standard of this stuff being available, that's when I started talking about it more often. In terms of whether this activism has had any success, they think there's 2 ways to measure it. Actually, 3 ways. Legally, culturally, and do we actually have access to stuff? Do we actually have access to stuff? No, I'm not at all. I can't BS my audience. When it comes to whether stuff is available, less stuff is available now than when I started doing this 10 years ago, which is very depressing. I've said in some of my videos, I feel like I've lost. I feel like I've failed my audience, and I've apologized to them for doing that. When it comes to legally, some wins, but they're not wins that are really exciting. The wheelchair bill in Colorado is pretty cool, but the ones for consumer electronics, I have not seen anything change on that front. Culturally, I think it's been very successful. Millions of people around the world have woken up to the idea that their products that used to be fixable are not, and that's not normal, and that should not be becoming normal. So, that whole frog that's in the boiling pot of water, I think people finally noticed, oh crap, and are trying to jump out of it. I would like to ideally see results that happen within my lifetime. There is that whole idea of creating a tree whose shade you're never going to sit in. It would be nice to sit in my lifetime, but I think that that I've gotten it started with that. I've got the ball rolling with that.
I think a lot of people on my channel always ask about right to repair, and your name's synonymous with that. So I think culturally, you're very, very much in there. So I think people put those 2 together, which is success, I'd say, in that sense.
I hope people stop associating me with it, though. That's the one thing. I like to see other people's names get associated, because there's tons of people that do way more work than I do. Nathan Proctor and Jessa Jones. There's a lot of people that Kevin O'Reilly, Kevin Kenny in Nebraska. Shout out to Kevin Kenny. But there's a bunch of people that do way more work than me. And for some reason, just because of a random algorithmic glitch with YouTube, I'm the one that gets mentioned all the time. And I don't think that's particularly fair to all these other people who do way more work than me.
Yeah, okay. I'll look into some of those guys. Haven't heard some of those names before. When we talk about consumer electronics specifically, and this whole thing of just parts being less available, things being harder to repair, and how it's not like other industries, how you brought up the air conditioner, for example. How did this start, and what's the driving force behind it, and how's it been going on for so long?
I can't tell you exactly when. I just remember looking at manuals for computers or Altair kind of stuff from the 70s and 80s and just thinking, you got a 300-page manual that goes over everything, or even cameras. I mean, Sony does this to some extent. If you buy a Sony NEX EA50 camera, you can get access to so many things on their website. You can get over 60 pages that demonstrate exactly how to take apart every single part of the camera. And then you'll buy some modern camera, and you don't get any of that. It's like, well, you're not even supposed to open it. You're not allowed to do any of this. So, and I don't even think that Sony is like this in other areas of their own business. I mean, when you look at what they do with their game consoles or PlayStations, I mean, it's the complete opposite of it. But there are these small cutouts of these companies that kind of remember what it was like when you could fix stuff. When I go over their website on my channel, I was showing people this website. This looks like it looks like 640 by 480. This thing looks like it's straight out of 1997. So it's literally like a time capsule. I can buy parts, and they're parts for a 2013 device. There's just these little, and I imagine if this was remade today, they would completely get rid of that entire department, because it's literally a relic from the past. You could just see from the age of the website, from the add to cart button that looks like something from 1994, where my credit card information is going to get stolen because you don't have HTTPS or SSL. It's but it's beautiful. When it comes to the computers, I can't tell you exactly because a lot of this change was happening when I was 5 years old. I was born in 1988, so I wasn't really there for most of it. I'm kind of here on the tail end of watching it go away. But I had a problem with this Goodman air conditioning unit that I have outside my house, and I realized that it wasn't clicking on. And I used this 8-gauge wire for my bike to essentially wire around here to here, and the compressor was working perfectly. But there was this weird clicky, odd noise. Like, I don't know if it was clicky or some high pitched electrical noise for wine. I just noticed that it was perfect at cooling my house, but I called it a relay. They called it a contactor. It just wasn't switching when I got voltage. And you can buy this thing for $20 to $80 online, and some of them are Goodman authorized distributors. So if I can do that for an air conditioner where there's 220 volts going through it, and that thing can use 6,000 watts easily, it's an outdoor unit. Why can't I do this for a smartphone? Why can't I do this for a laptop? Why can't I do this for anything else? That's so much more dangerous. You hear the argument of danger used constantly. You're probably more likely to kill yourself with 220 volts with like a 30 or 60 amp condenser unit than you are with a smartphone battery.
But what about this other thing that's going on, this other trend where you have kind of like a pay-to-play system where, you buy a certain thing and you think you've got all the features that you should have, but then you kind of have to pay to unlock more features. Like, for example, that famous case of the BMW car that was going to come out where you had to pay for heated seating when you already purchased the vehicle. Like, luckily they backed away from that, but you can see it's a kind of trend that's kind of going on with these companies. What do you think about that?
It's going to annoy a lot of people. I know people, they have this argument of, I'm not going to have a car where I have all the hardware for heated seats because I already paid for it, but you're not making it available to me. And the car manufacturer will say, technically, it is cheaper for us to put this in every car than it is to have separate production lines where we don't. This allows us to make the car cheaper for you. Essentially, it lowers their manufacturing costs, but I think and that's probably true. It does lower the manufacturer's manufacturing costs. So it makes sense to them to put that in every car. However, if they need to be able to extract money out of you for these features, that's what they've done throughout the years. Like, even in the 70s, you would have cars with different packages that had different things. This one has the cooler wheels, this one has the nicer interior, this one has whatever features on it that the other one doesn't. They want to be able to extract more money, but they also want to decrease their costs. The part that makes it offensive to the consumer is when did the savings come to them? This is happening at the same time that we have market adjustment fees of $5,000 to $10,000. So if you're going to say, well, this actually allows us to make manufacturing cheaper for us, we're not billing you extra for those parts that we're putting in there for the seat heaters, while simultaneously having dealers charge $2,000 to $10,000 in market adjustment fees. That's really bad optics. Two things can be true at the same time, which is this makes manufacturing cheaper for the manufacturer. It probably is cheaper for them to put this additional feature into every car than to only put it into certain cars. Simultaneously, since you are charging $2,000 to $10,000 more, which is what is essentially a middle finger fee, no customer is going to take this well, and they are going to want to take you out back and shoot you when they see that their car has features in it that you're going to bill them for monthly when the hardware is already there. And the hard part here is figuring if you even were to legislate this. I don't even think it's possible, because this comes down to how do you legislate don't be an asshole. So if you have a car that wants to charge you $5 or $10 a month for heated seats, let's say that. So $10 a month for heated seats, like $120 a year over the course of 10 years, $1,200. What if they you said we are not allowed to have subscriptions for this. What if they just charge you $1,200 more for the car? What if everybody just across the board decided to start doing that? I don't know how you would legislate that. I do think that's one of those things where you have to protest by not buying cars that do that. But every car company now does something like that. There are people that say, well, Ford sucks. You shouldn't buy a Ford, buy this. So they buy a General Motors. And then you have a General Motors car where they upload all of your data without your consent to GM, who sells it to LexisNexis, who sells it to an insurance company. Well, don't buy that, buy a Tesla. And God knows all the problems with that. Every single car company kind of does something like that. So it's really hard to have a protest vote where I'm going to buy from the ethical car company. Good luck with that.
I didn't know about that whole GM. Is that true? The GM selling data thing?
Yeah, it's in the New York. There's 2 articles on it in the New York Times. So that this person noticed their insurance rates went up, and they were curious why. And apparently, the issue was they had hard braking and quick acceleration. The issue here is with a lot of these safety systems, anybody who's tried to use Tesla full self-driving and use their safety score will see this. When you hit the brake back in the day, any touch of the brake on an electric car, it would consider as hard braking. Their idea is if the regenerative braking from taking your foot off the accelerator was not enough, that must mean that you were following too soon. It couldn't be that the person in front of you smashed on his brakes. It couldn't be the person in front of you was driving drunk, so you wanted to stop so you didn't hit them when they did something stupid. It must be that it's your problem. These systems kind of suck. So this person saw his insurance rate skyrocket, and he figured out that the entire system was essentially his car was uploading data on where he was going, how fast he was going, what angle he was making when he was turning, whether or not he was hard braking, and this was uploaded to GE to LexisNexis, and LexisNexis allows insurance companies to get this, and they're using it to rate your driving and figure out what to charge you. It's kind of insane. And this guy never hit consent on any of this. It's like, I know people are going to think, well, this is, some random conspiracy blog or horrible website. Whether you like it or not, like the New York Times is not going to publish this if it was just, some random dude on a forum. That's the thing. A lot of people in my comments will say, if you don't like this, if you don't like the heated seats thing, then go somewhere else. And like, point taken, I'd like to. The problem that I notice is, if a lot of this kind of abusive anti-ownership stuff started happening in the late 80s, early 90s, and it's 2024, at what point is the frog not able to jump out of the pot? Like, at what point is it oh crap, I'm already screwed kind of thing? Because what company are you going to go to? Like when it comes to even something like the forced arbitration clauses I've been talking about in a lot of my videos, where all these companies are pushing you into forced arbitration, where if you want a class action lawsuit against them because they've done something wrong to their consumers, so you can get redress, or you can have an extended warranty apply to your broken device. You can't do that. Well, go somewhere else. What do you do when every single company does the exact same thing? We've kind of lost the opportunity to push back against a lot of these things unless you go without. Most of the general public does not want to do that just in order to push back and protest against these things. But there are people out there that will just say, I'm not putting up with any of this at all altogether. I'm going to live in the middle of nowhere, and I'm going to live my own life and have my own little farm and screw all of you. And, it's tempting sometimes.
But I think that's a very small proportion. I think most people just want to kind of get on with their life, provide for their family, do whatever, just live their day-to-day life. But I think if looking at all of this, I think if something's going to happen, it has to come from the top down. So in terms of legislation and let's say right to repair, like how do we navigate that? How do you see a path forward where things can change? Because I know we've had a bit of a glimmer of hope. If you look at the EU, for example, like no one ever thought the iPhone would change to USB-C by force, but it's happened and everything seems to be all right. So I think I've been seeing some things, but where do you think this has to come from? How do you think it can work?
The organic way that I hope to do it, and again, this is the answer that nobody wants. The organic way is try to get the next generation excited about this so that when they work at one of these companies, they'll just leave the room when a certain practice occurs and say, nope, we're just not doing this. So, if a kid gets an electronics engineering degree or a degree in something else like that and decides to work at one of these companies, who started when he was 15 watching a live stream of me fixing a MacBook, and he got into this because of this, and then I tell him, here's why I'm not going to be able to do this in 2 to 4 years. When he works at one of these companies and they say, and he knows that his colleague or the person down the hall or somebody in a Slack chat, like, you're the person responsible for telling Intersil, don't make this chip available. He's going to raise it as an issue. He or she's going to knock on the door and say, why is this? And that's like the real type of change that I want to create. Even when it comes to something like, legalize marijuana, you have this thing where it's not like this overnight thing. It's just every single person that's in the legislature in this state grew up realizing that marijuana is not going to turn you into a devil. It's not the devil's whatever plant or whatever, and they just go like or even like in the district attorney's office, once everybody is of a certain generation, they just look at it and it's like, we really gonna waste time in this? Next case. I'm kind of hoping that something like that happens with right to repair, as all these people that grew up seeing this as a cool thing, the people that got into electronics, got into computer engineering and all this stuff because they watched videos from Jessa Jones or Jesse Cruz or TCRS Circuit or me or Northridge Fix or any of these people. Like, they're not going to want to be the person that's taking that away from somebody else. And I'm hoping that is what does it. In the short term, with the legislation, that's a really difficult one. Again, it's how do you legislate don't be an asshole? So, for instance, let's say that we say make available the parts and tools that you make available and manuals that you make available to your authorized repair providers. What's an authorized repair provider? With Apple, you have their authorized repair provider, which is essentially a mailing center. They don't even know how to replace the charging port in an iPhone. With the iPhone 6, they didn't even know that the headphone jack wasn't soldered to the board. They have access to nothing. If I had access to what they had access to, I would have to close tomorrow because I couldn't fix anything. They're essentially a mailing depot. They mail stuff back to the company. Now, they also do refurbishing. So during the 2011 MacBook Pro GPU crisis, where they had to have, with a class action lawsuit resulted in them having to fix all those boards for free under warranty, they were doing actual chip rework. They were replacing a 900 plus ball BGA chip, doing motherboard component level repair. I want access to what that guy has access to. I don't want access to the Apple mailing center depot bullshit that doesn't give me access to anything. But when the law is written, they could just say, well, we're going to give you access to what the authorized repair center gets access to. It's like, no, okay, what is an authorized repair center? Is it that person or is it this person? There are so many ways to get around this. They could say, well, that's not our authorized repair provider. That's our reverse logistics center or something. You know, I'm very curious to see how this works, because a lot of these laws in America that have just got passed, whether it's the New York State right to repair bill, the Minnesota one, or the California one, like they take some time to go into effect, and when they do, I'm going to be knocking on their door saying, I want access to what that guy has. And I would love to see what they say at that point. I don't know yet. I have my cynicism at this point, because every time I've thought that there's been progress, we've been screwed. But I'd like to see what happens. But I imagine that the next hurdle to jump over is that most of the manufacturers, authorized repair providers, they don't fix stuff. They replace everything. Like, you know, you have a nick in your screen. We're going to replace the hinges and the Wi-Fi antenna and the camera and the back cover and the fingerprint sensor. They're going to replace everything rather than just replace the screen. If you have a problem with your motherboard, you're not going to replace a chip. You're going to replace everything. So I think that's the part that's going to be difficult.
That whole replacement of all the components instead of just like one little bit, is it because they can't be bothered to, you know, fix that one chip that's gone bad or blown up or whatever? Or is it just, you know, to do with that integration problem again, where everything's become so miniaturized and it's just hard?
They don't want to teach people how to do all that stuff, and I understand. It's a pain in the ass. I've trained employees that barely had a high school diploma on how to do this from scratch. It's much easier to train somebody, you know, take 4 screw out, put 4 screw in, give back to customer. It's easier to train people on that across the country than it is board level repair. I don't have a problem with that. The problem that I have is not when you say you don't want to do it. It's when you say, we're going to make sure nobody can do it. That's where the problem steps in. People will say that I'm bothered by the fact that the manufacturer won't fix these things for the customer. That's somewhat, but that's not what bothers me. It's when the manufacturer used to tell my customers, I'm never going to forget this, back in 2013, if they told this one woman, if somebody tells you they could fix this without replacing it, they're scamming you. Like, are you serious? We already had enough reasons to not be trusted, because, you know, now the trust level in unauthorized repair in 2024 is very different from 2008 to 2012. Back then, people acted like, you know, they looked like they were walking into a drug deal. They felt like they were like somebody was going to jump up behind them and hit them over the head. They were expecting something bad to happen. So the fact that the manufacturer was going out of their way to tell a customer, if somebody says they can do this, they're scamming you, it's like, who the are you? Like, that's the problem that I have. It's not that you don't do the work. That was where a lot of where the salt came from in the early days in 2013 and 2014. If you're going to say that I'm scamming for doing this work, I'm going to show the world that I can do it. I'm going to show them that you're wrong. It's one thing if you don't want to do the work. I have no problem with them not wanting to do the work. Don't say that nobody else can do it either, because there are repairs my shop doesn't do. I'm very specialized. The only way that I'm able to get things done inside of 1 or 2 days for people in a satisfactory manner is by specializing. And if somebody comes in and asks for something that I don't do, I'm not going to tell them nobody can do this. And if somebody tells you they can, they're scamming you. I'll say, I don't know how to do this. Simply because I don't know how to do this in an economically viable way does not mean that nobody can. Here are a list of other businesses that may be able to help you, that may be able to give you a better deal than I can give you. Like, what's so hard about that?
Looking at the whole repair industry, would you say that it's improving? I should say, like, you know, secondary repair or like unofficial repair shops. Are you saying that would you say that it's improved or like kind of gone backwards in the past, like say 5?
Oh, it's definitely backwards. I would say 100% backwards. When I started doing this, you could not find a YouTube video of people doing this type of stuff. And you have, it's not just me. In 2013 or 2014, when it came to this random board repair stuff, there was like maybe me and one other person. Now there's like hundreds and thousands of people making videos in this stuff. And you have all these little Discord groups and Facebook groups where people are talking about component level repair. People didn't used to do this. So in terms of having a community, it is far better now than it was before. Because back in the day, like 2008, there was this mentality that if I share any information, if I tell anybody how to do this, I will now lose my competitive edge. And if I lose my competitive edge, then I will never make money again. And what I've tried to do with my channel is show that this scarcity mindset doesn't work. It's not about increasing the percentage of the pie that you get. You should just make the pie as big as possible so you don't really care about the percentage. So community has definitely improved. In terms of access to parts, chips, schematics, everything else, I would say it's worse now than it was 5 years ago. I would say 5 years ago was worse than where it was 10 years ago. At least in my particular vertical. I can't speak for every industry. I can only speak for, my specific area of expertise. But in this area, yeah, everything has gotten considerably worse. which is why it's also frustrating to see all these press releases of this 24-page thing from Apple where it talks about how we're making repair available to all. Like, that's a core value. It's like, no, it's not. Suck it. Like, no, to get the out of here. It's not. It's demonstrably not. That video, people were saying, why are you talking so fast in this video? It's because my camera battery only lasts for 45 minutes, and I don't know how to get through this entire document unless I talk like I'm a rabbit on coke.
Right, fair enough. Okay, I'm not going to keep you for too much longer, but I do want to...
Feel free to. This is plugged in.
Okay.
So I can...
Oh, good. But I did want to ask a question about Apple and the kind of recent about face where they're saying, yeah, like, you know, as you said, we're making things available, tools available. What's kind of been wrong with their approach? Like, is it just kind of, you know, lip service, or what's been going on with that?
Yeah, the issue is not that it's not how do I put this? It's not a logistical thing where they're doing the right thing, but there's one little hang up in this particular area of the supply chain. It's that fundamentally from the ground up, this program was never designed to be used by a real human being. It was not designed as a repair program. This was, in my opinion, designed in order to create press that they actually care about repair. It was there so that they can go to legislators and say, listen, okay, maybe they have some points, but look, see, we have a repair program. Look at our binder. Look at our policies and all this stuff. Or for them to be able to say, look, we created it and nobody signed up. I guess they don't really care about this after all. They're trying to make us look stupid. They're trying to make us look petty, in my opinion. It's one of those three things. Because when you look at this repair program, if you just look at what it was like when IRP came out, you were not allowed to stock parts. When a customer came into the store, what you were supposed to do in the beginning, this has changed, but in the beginning, you were supposed to take down the information on their product, take in their info, you know, their phone number, their address, their name, which, by the way, they're the ones saying that they care so much about data privacy and security, but in their program, I have to collect all this information on you that I don't have to collect if you're just my normal customer. Feel free to be anonymous. I have to collect all this info on you, collect information on your device, and then I have to order the part. So if you're an independent repair center, I believe in stocking parts. I would have hundreds of thousands of dollars of parts in my store for every single item that I worked on. So regardless of what was wrong with it, I could get that thing done in 20 minutes. Now I have to buy a part and wait a week or 2 to 4 days for it to show up. Who's going to wait a few days for a battery on a smartphone? That's insane. So when you just look at little things like that, nobody was in that room that was thinking about how to make this a repair program that actually works. I don't even believe that somebody thinking about repair was involved in the creation of these programs. I would imagine that this was just something that was made up by a group of people that wanted to be able to show legislators or impact reports, look, we're creating a repair program. When it comes to parts that are available in the program, all I can get are, again, the parts that you can get as an authorized repair center. I can't buy the screen by itself for $38 to $150. I have to buy the display assembly for $300 to $800. My customers come to me because they want to go to the guy that's replacing just the part that's broken. They don't want me to replace the entire motherboard. They want me to replace the chip. They don't want me to replace the screen assembly. They want me to replace the screen. They don't want me to replace their top case. They want me to replace their keyboard. People come to these types of small repair shops because we fix the thing that's broken. We don't replace the $3,000 condenser unit from my air conditioner. We replace the $50 contact relay, and the HVAC guy will charge me $100 or $200 for the visit. That's the point. This program does not make many of those parts available. It requires that we sign a very restrictive NDA, which is why there are many people that I've spoken to that told me things that I really wish I could say on camera, but I can't because we promised not to talk about some certain even worse elements of the program. I don't make my customers sign an NDA when they get a repair from me. I sell parts in store.rossmanngroup.com. My customers don't have to sign an NDA. It's not kosher. It's not a good agreement. Nothing in that program is designed for anybody to actually use it. It wasn't made for repair people. You can't get schematics. You get a manual that says, here's how you take the bottom off of the computer. I know how to take the 8 screws off of the bottom of the computer. I don't need the manufacturer to tell me that. When we say schematics, diagrams, manuals, I'm not talking about something that tells me, here's how you unplug the battery. I know how to do that. We're talking about board schematics. We're talking about board views. It doesn't make any of that available.
It will be hard to imagine that coming back into vogue, but maybe one day. Closing off here, or coming towards the end of the conversation, for those consumers out there who'd want to support the right to repair movement, what advice would you give them?
I would say let the manufacturer know. The more that they hear from people, this is why I don't want to buy your next generation of product. I've had this experience. I think that kind of pushback would do something. I would like to say, well, don't buy this, but the problem is, as I said, you're at a point where 15 or 30 years ago, I think that you could do that. Now, by not doing that, you're kind of opting out of modern society, which, as you said, most people don't want to do that. They don't want to be like my friend in Pittsfield, New Hampshire, that lives completely off the grid and doesn't have a phone or anything like that. They want to be able to take part in normal society. So I would say push back against manufacturers. And if you're one of the people that started watching stuff like this, or you were watching Dave Jones at EEV Blog or something, and you got into engineering and you started working at these companies as a result of watching all of us, when you start working at these companies, push back a little bit. You have a lot more power than you think you do. Even with the people that I know in my own lives, I tell them constantly with their own issues, walk into a C-level executive's office and say, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? And like, okay, what if you live a boring, miserable, aggravating life as a result of not taking risks? Take a little bit of risk. Push back. If you work at the company, ask why things are done this way. Talk to your coworkers. See if you get them interested in figuring out why things are done that way and whether or not they're open to pushing back. Maybe it doesn't work, but at least you know that you tried. Always poke.
I guess, it's one thing to, start working at one of these companies and push back. But what do you think about the whole other thing that's kind of starting to happen, like companies like Framework, for example, and Fairphone, even though that didn't go that well, that try to kind of just from the ground up try and make things replaceable and user-friendly in that way?
I think that they may be falling into the Firefox trap of, we have choices, but it's like the 1 to 3% market share kind of thing. I like what Framework is doing. They're doing good things. At the same time, you have to sign an NDA to get access to a board schematic. I imagine you have to sign an NDA to get access to a board schematic because that board is a design that may or may not be a design that was created by a company that creates them for others, that restricts them in some way, shape, or form. So while I like what they're doing, they're trying their best to do a great thing. There's two things there, which is the problem that you always deal with in open source, which is I want to have something that treats me better. Therefore, I'm going to have to deal with less options. When you go to Dell or Lenovo or HP or Acer, you have 50 different options for exactly the type of computer you want. When you go to Framework, you kind of have like one or two because they don't have the money of those companies. And secondly, the issue that I think you may run into is simply the fact that I have to sign an NDA to get access to a schematic. I'm not going to blame Nirav for it. He's a cool guy. It's just I understand why it's the case, but that's because they don't have control over every aspect of the chain in the same way that Apple does. Apple could berate if they wanted to make schematics available. Apple is not going to be in a position where they have to ask nicely to somebody or negotiate or say, okay, fine, if you make the end user sign an NDA, then we'll allow you to do it. Because they're vertically integrated. They own their entire supply chain for the most part. There are companies like Framework. I like what they're doing, but I think that I want to see them succeed more. But again, they're not going to be able to offer as many choices to the consumer because they're playing catch up. They don't have the money that Dell, Acer, HP, or Lenovo do, and also they're not going to be as vertically integrated in the supply chain. They're doing their best, and I really appreciate the work that they're doing. It's awesome. But like you said, also, I'm just curious. I know that you're asking me questions. But when you said the Fairphone didn't work out so well, what, from your view, kind of didn't work out well with them?
I saw a report about market share. It kind of was missing targets, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, and the ironic thing is that let's say you do get a schematic for the ironic thing is what makes a device really fixable in many ways is it's not just the schematics and all the parts being available, it's the popularity of it. So if, let's say, Framework did not make parts available, right? Let's say that they went the Apple route. I would never be able to fix their products. I would be more able to fix Apple products than Framework if Framework decided to be assholes and not make things available by nature of the fact that there's so many available. Because there are so many Apple products available, there is so much demand for some guy to go through a dumpster and find every single thing that goes into it. There was so much demand for somebody like me to stay up until 4 a.m. for 3 years in a row before I started doing board repair videos just to try and figure it out and show other people. So when you have a product that's niche, that has that 1 to 3% market share, even if, let's say you have a schematic in a board view, right? How many repair shops are going to have a donor Framework board to take parts off? You know what I'm saying? Like, how many of them are going to have the chips in their stockpile for it? Like, at my store, I can't get access to chips that I need. So I dumpster dive for donor boards, and sometimes those donor boards have broken chips on it. Very often the reason that a board was thrown away is because the charging IC that I need didn't work on that board. But if I have a stack of 78 of them that I bought, then one of them will have the thing on it that I need, and it's worth it for me to buy 78 of them because I know I'm going to see that product 30 times a day. If it's a product that has a 1 to 3% market share where I'm not going to see that product more than once a year, is it really worth it to me to stock up on parts for it? And if I can't stock up on parts for it, then that means that I have to order things one at a time. If I have to order things one at a time because that is a very, very niche product, then that means that my customer has to wait every time I want to order a part. You got to wait 3 days. Oh, never mind. That wasn't what's wrong with it. I think it's this thing. Okay. Oh, never mind. That wasn't that. I have to wait another 3 days. Who wants to? Who wants to deal with that type of repair experience? So I love what Framework's doing, and I love the fact that they're trying and they have their heart in the right place. They're good people. I've spoken to people at that company. I wouldn't be saying, I don't do this lightly. I haven't had a single sponsor in 13 years. They are very, very good people. At the same time, I feel like they are really fighting this ridiculously uphill battle.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you there. Okay, so 2 more questions. So second last one has to do with the Mac. This is a bit random, but it has to do with the MacBook Pro, I'm pretty sure. I was watching a video not long ago that there was an issue with one of the controllers for the for the USB-C port on one of the sides where it keeps blowing up and kind of taking out the power for the whole laptop if you leave it plugged in. And Apple's been using that chip since 2016 or something. And could you explain why they'll do such a move like that? Because I think that's ridiculous.
So yeah, I think you're talking about the CD3215. They started using that in 2016. Before that, in the A1534 with the 8200045 board, there was something like 13 chips that made up the USB-C muxing circuit. So USB-C muxing means you have a USB-C port. It's kind of, Zefrank has these videos on biology that I love. They're amazing. He has a video on some sort of sea turtle or something, and it has this orifice called a cloaca. It's a multi-purpose orifice, and he said he was joking in some way and saying like, you can use this for eating, breathing, pooping, pretty much multi-purpose orifice. And a USB-C port is, as Zefrank said, a multi-purpose orifice. You use this for charging. You take power in, putting power out, HDMI, DisplayPort, drives, data. You use this for everything. So it's a very, very complicated thing. And if you look at the schematic for an A1534, which is that 12-inch piece of MacBook that dies all the time from 2015, you'll see that the USB-C muxing circuit in there, it's like 10 or 13 different chips. It's very, very complicated, and there's a lot of points of failure there. So in 2016, they did what, in my opinion, is a very good thing. Instead of having 10 or 13 chips for one port, let's make it 1 chip or 2 chips. And that's what they did with the CD3215. I think that was a step in the right direction because it's less points of failure there. It's less random things that can go wrong. And it was also more reliable than the older one. Now, the problem there is if one of them dies, they all die. Now, sometimes it's an issue of it shorting to ground. And okay, if you have a short to ground on a main power rail, that's going to be difficult to deal with. If one of those chips has a short to ground and it shorts the power rail, powering it to ground, I get it. But what if it's just an issue with communication? What if it's just dead for some other reason? It's very interesting that when it's dead for a reason like communication, that every other one of the USB-C ports will not work. They all need to work. If I remove one of the, because this is how you could see it, the silliness of it. Let's say you have 4 charging ports. If I remove one of those chips, the rest won't work. It's not even about them being damaged. If one of them just simply isn't communicating properly, the other 3 won't work. I've had a lot to say on my channel about the design of Apple products and whether or not I think that they are really designed for longevity, as certain propagandists have said recently. But I am not I could talk for like 5 hours on that part. The part that gets difficult is that buying a CD3215, which is the charging chip they used from 2017 through 18, very easy. Buying a CD3217, which is the charging chip they used from 2019 to today, very difficult. Neither of these chips were chips where I could just go up to Texas Instruments and say, hey, I'd like to buy this. But the first one, again, when it comes to that whole analogy I made before about, the cat going outside the restaurant and going through the dumpster and finding stuff, they were plentiful. With the CD3217, that's the analogy of, the cat goes to the dumpster, but every single person at the restaurant cleaned their entire plate and washed it after eating all the food, so there's nothing there. They're expensive. Half of the time that you try to buy from the sellers that make them available, you're getting chips that are dead anyway. Sometimes I'll literally get chips where I can tell that you just took a random thing and they literally just drew the words CD on the chip without it even actually working. So that's gotten more difficult in recent years. That also increases the cost of repair, by the way. If I have to spend $250 to $300 on a donor board to get that chip, what am I going to charge you as a customer? I started out doing board repairs for $250 back in the day. I can't do a board repair for a customer at $250 when the person doing the repair is getting $30 to $50 an hour and plus whatever benefits, and I have to buy a donor board for $200 to $300 to get one chip. So that's been a serious problem because people have asked us like, hey, why is this board repair this much money? Somebody else told me you used to do it for this, and I would just show them I need this chip. I need to buy this donor board that costs $300 to get this chip, and that really kind of sucks.
Okay, so last question. I just wanted to know if you had any comments on the whole industry as a whole or right to repair or anything else that you wanted to say. Any final comments?
Yeah, the thing that I would say is if you want to get people involved, you want to get people excited about it, don't do bumper sticker activism, don't lecture people, don't tell them that they're bad. The way I've tried to get people involved in this particularly is the three ways are, hey, if I show you how I'm doing the work and you find it entertaining, great. If you're able to fix something you otherwise weren't able to fix, that means that you get that little kick of dopamine, which makes you excited to do it again. And if I can help somebody make money at their business, or I can help somebody save money through repair, that's going to get them invested. The way you get people to care about issues is you get them personally invested by sharing your joy, not by looking down on them. Like the type of person that's going to say, you're bad, you drive a Ford F-350, you're ruining you're bad. Like that doesn't work. That results in somebody that, rolls coal every single time you drive by in an energy efficient vehicle. It doesn't work. It creates enemies. So try to spread the word and enjoy right to repair by saving somebody money or by getting them to be excited, even if they just do something like make their thermostat work again. Like there's going to be a kick of dopamine when you solve a problem that you didn't know how to solve and you solve the puzzle and it actually works. There's always that little yes. And if you get people to experience that, then you've got people on your side for life. So try to spread the word that way. Don't tell people you're bad, you bought this product, you're bad, you didn't fix this thing, or you're bad because you don't care about repair. You should care about this. Here's why you should. Try to not lecture people on it. Get them to share in your joy. And if they're getting screwed over by a company, point out what's going on and try to help them out.
I think that's a great way to finish. I just wanted to thank you for coming on. I think it's just such a big topic nowadays. I think a lot of people are starting to realize just what's going on, which is only and ultimately a good thing.